Välkommen till Poddgeek.
En podd om att podda. Välkommen till Poddgeek avsnitt 42. Och här ska vi tala om RSS-feeden som är jätteviktig för oss podcastare. Och när jag har såna här svåra tekniska frågor så vänder jag mig till min podcast Pärl i Köpenhamn som heter Karin Hög och som har varit en podcastare väldigt länge. Hon har varit med i Poddgeek tidigare och idag tänkte jag att vi skulle göra en intervju på engelska så att alla verkligen känner att jag hänger med på det här med RSS och feed och allt sammans. Så jag säger bara välkommen Karin. Welcome Karin!
Thank you very much Lena. Normally we speak Danish together because you do understand a little Danish. Quite a bit of Danish. But I understand that for Swedish and Danish people, it's easier to speak English together. So bear with us. Yeah.
I wanted to ask the question to you. What is an RSS feed?
Yeah. RSS feed is a file, actually. It's an XML file that you put on a hosting server, which makes it an RSS feed. Because in this file, there is some text. And this text is extremely important for us as podcasters. And I understand that people think it's too geeky and it's really annoying and it's still too complicated with this RSS feeds. And why don't we just forget all about RSS and move into apps and stuff? But I think, and I'm so happy that you asked me because because this is an important discussion, actually. Why do we have to keep this RSS feed? Why do we still have to make this file that makes our podcast? And I think we as podcasters are obligated to find out what it's all about. And it's for our own sake. Not for the listeners' sake, really, but also that, but mostly for our own sake. And I know you said I've been in podcasting for a long, long time since it all started. I came from radio into podcasting and I thought it was great. But I hate hearing myself saying that I think that podcasting should be the same. And like in the old days, but I really mean it, and I'll explain to you why.
Oh, good.
It all started with blogs. It didn't start with radio. It started with blogs, and some people remember how we subscribed to blogs from all over the world through RSS, through this file that people in different ways put up online so you could subscribe and have new blog posts delivered right to your software on your computer. Content, knowledge, information that you could not get anywhere else unless you had to look for it. It came right into your RSS reader. We had RSS readers at the time.
Oh, this sounds very old-fashioned, so okay.
It was so old-fashioned, and now we don't have it anymore. But this was before Twitter, before Facebook, before Instagram and YouTube and all this. We didn't have that. We didn't even have iPhones. We didn't have apps. It didn't exist. So some people found out that if you want to distribute to the right people, to the most interested people, you could do it through RSS. So we took these RSS feeds, put it into our RSS readers, and then when we opened our RSS readers, we could see, oh, there's a new blog post about this, about that. The very niche things we were interested in knowing about. It was fantastic. So some people found out that you could do the same with audio. And this was Dave Weiner at the time. He was the guy who made the RSS feed. but together with Adam Curry, who is an MTV music host kind of guy, they put a software together that could grab this RSS audio feed that you subscribe to. And this was before iTunes even.
So when are we in time now?
We are in 05. Okay. So, and iTunes only came about with podcasting in 06. So before that, you took a blog post, RSS feeds for blog post, you could take an RSS feed for a podcast, and then you could subscribe through this, and then you could transfer the file to your iPod. Did you have an iPod?
No, I didn't.
No. But we all had iPods, at the time, or some people had another MP3 player, so you could transfer the files. And now with these mobile connections that we have today, and everything is so much faster, and now we have Facebook and Twitter, we have everything. We don't need it anymore, really, to do it that way. It was too complicated, but that was the way we did it. So why do we have to keep this RSS file that made this possible? We do, and now I go not to the listener's point of view, but to the podcaster's point of view. Mm-hmm. It's because we own the content. It's our media. It's my podcast. Nobody is allowed to go in and change in the RSS feed. I make it myself. I make it together with Libsyn, who knows all about the new tags and all the new specifications that your podcast needs, to iTunes and Google and Spotify and all that. But it's my content. I decide what to put in it. So I own this media, and that's what I think we should stick to. And so far, I have not seen any other way to do this than to maintain the RSS feed, this XML file that you make together with Libsyn or Spreaker or whoever you make it with, Spotify, anywhere. So as long as you have this RSS feed, it's your content.
So what do you mean that someone can change something in my content if I sign away my rights to the file?
Over the years, Lena, I have heard so many people say it's so old-fashioned, it's too complicated for people to find out. And also, how do we put commercials in podcasts? Can we do it in the RSS feed? No, I don't want, And how do we all different kinds of things. How do we track people? How can we track how many listeners we have and where do they go afterwards, just like we can do on websites. We can track people. We can make them say okay to cookies, and then we can track them. We can stalk them on Facebook and Instagram and wherever they go on the internet, and we can throw commercials at them. And this is even out of our own hands. This is just something that happens, and it's very hard for us as content providers to control this. And also people say, now we have apps. We don't need RSS feeds because we have apps. So people can just subscribe to an app, and then they can, yes, but who owns the app? Who is it? It's not your app necessarily. It's somebody else's app. And who are those people? And why do they want to make this app? There's a lot of apps. Which one are you using? I'm using Overcast.
Well, I am using Castro because I'm an Elsie fan.
Oh, yeah. Elsie loves Castro. But that's the Apple Podcast app is the most one used when people are on iPhones, and on Google is the Google Podcasts, and now Spotify. I have to say that when I speak to Swedish people, Spotify is huge. So listeners might think about it, but you as a content provider should think very carefully. Who owns the app that you put your content into? And some apps just grab the RSS feed and the content from iTunes, from Apple, That's fine. They can do that because it's still your RSS feed. It's still the content that you own. But as soon as you submit your podcast to an app, there's an owner behind that. They want to stalk the listeners. For sure they do. That's their whole business model. They want to put commercials in your podcast so you can make money on your content. Yes, but they want to make money on your content as well. And some of the apps, like Anchor, for instance, is free. Why is it free? You know, when on the internet something is free, it's you who are the product. So who owns these apps? Who owns these sites? You know, there's podcast networks also where you can submit you can be a part of a podcast network. But you should always ask yourself, who are the people who owns this network and what do they want to do with it? Are they in it for you to make your life easier as a podcaster, or are they just in it to get your content to make money for themselves? So to know about RSS feed, I think you have an obligation to look into that, to always think, is it still my podcast? Do I own the RSS feed? It might be that someone else is creating your podcast feed. In my case, Libsyn is making my feed. So they provide me with an RSS feed. But I trust Libsyn. I know they will never, ever, ever do anything with my RSS feed other than hosting it. There are other people who are more fundamentalists even than I am, who say, you want to host your own RSS feed, your own XML file. You want to have that on your own server. And that's what the WordPress people say. Mm-hmm. So when you have a blog on WordPress, you can decide to host your own. I know Todd Cochran from Blueberry, from Raw Voice, always says you have to own your own. You have to host your own. You have to control your own podcast feed. You have to be able to drag the file from the internet, open the XML file, look at the tags and all the text that you should know what is as a podcaster. Of course you should. It's important. So, and then put it back up on the server. I don't think that we used to do that in the old days. We used to download and upload the RSS feed, that file. We were always able to open it. But I trust Libsyn more than my own knowledge when it comes to adjusting my RSS feed, my file. They are really clever in doing that. Raw Voice are as well. Blueberry are as well. So those two are my favorite people in podcasting because I trust them. And I know that they're way ahead of any of us when it comes to RSS feed and how the RSS feed is compatible with all the different there are more and more new apps coming out all the time. And especially Apple is the main one, but now Google, now Spotify. What they demand for our RSS feed is important to know. And I don't know about you, Lena, but I try, but it's hard to keep up with that. So I trust Libsyn with doing that. So it's always, my feed is always correct, and I can always go in and validate it. That's also something that you should learn how to do. And even I am not sure if Podbase is a Swedish. It's pod, podba.se. That's for Sweden, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So it might even be a Swedish, but it's a Swedish domain anyway. On that domain, Podbase, you can go in and validate your feed and see if it works.
You just copy the link marks? And then you put it in there.
Yeah, you just copy the link to the XML file, which is your RSS feed. You copy that and put that in Podbase and see, hey, is my image too small, too big? Is there anything wrong? You should do that at least every second time you put up a podcast, because suddenly one day when something breaks with your RSS feed, you'd be able to find out what it is. It might just be a little minor thing in your text or whatever. You should be an RSS mechanic yourself. It's not too hard.
I think I'm a little bit lazy, and I'm not as knowledgeable as you are. So that is my reason to host with a hosting company, and also to. I don't do that every other time. Maybe I should, but I do it occasionally. I do check I validate my file.
People sometimes come to me and say, "There's something wrong." There's something wrong with my podcast. My latest episode is not showing up in iTunes, and I can hear from the way they describe the problem that the basic knowledge about what is RSS, what is hosting, and what is this, that they don't have that. But so I go in, and the first thing I do is to validate their feed and see. It's just so easy.
Yeah, it's easy because it says what's wrong with it, so you can easily just adjust.
I know, and then it can be a simple thing that your logo is not completely square, or your logo is too small. So then you have to go to your graphics designer or to your graphics program and fix that, and then put up a new logo, and then it'll fix the problem.
So if we move on to, hosting. Yeah, you said that Ted Cochran wants to host his own files, but why is that not advisable to host your own file?
I don't think it is. It's hard to find. In the old days, people put the audio files up where they were hosting their blog, for instance. And some of them said, but Euro and all these, they have one.com, they have free hosting, and they have free downloads, and they have free traffic, and they have that. But they only had that until your podcast got as popular as yours, for instance, Lena. They would have called you up or sent you an email or just removed your files a long time ago when they find out and that you have too many downloads. They don't want that. But a few audio files is okay. So you have to host somewhere where you can be sure that they can not only live up to the demand right here and now. Say 1,000 people download the Shipping Podcast, at one time, because you have some really famous guest or that Lena Jødberg is top of mind everywhere. So they all go to your podcast and download the same episode at one time at 2:00 at night. Who has a server that can do that? Libsyn does. Raw Voice, Blueberry has, and a lot of these big companies, they have that. So they don't care if 10,000 people download your podcast or even more. So if I had my own server in the back of my bedroom, always open, always that, or if I use some free hosting service like archive.org or whatever people have been using over the years, you would definitely come across the problem that suddenly it would stop or it would be slow at least. So there are so many slow.
She had a hosting via her WordPress site, and she couldn't understand why it was so expensive to host. For her WordPress site, the debit notes keep growing and growing, and all of a sudden she started to talk to us about it because we are in a mastermind group, and she said, I don't understand why it's so expensive to host.
It is expensive to host.
And then we explained to her that maybe you should use a hosting company instead of using your WordPress to host it yourself.
Absolutely, because then it's, I don't know where she was hosting, but it could be anywhere where she upload her whole WordPress blog to. It's just another hosting service. And the audio files
are so big. So it takes up a lot of space in that WordPress for her.
Yes. And in the beginning, in the old days that we were talking about before, there were a lot of video podcasts. And we treated video the same way as we did with audio. So everybody could make a video podcast, but the video files are even more expensive to host and let people download. It's not possible. It's just too expensive. So now we have YouTube. We use YouTube for that, and it's even free. I can't believe it. But Google is a big company, so they can somehow afford it. But on your own, you could not afford hosting video files. And audio files are not at all as big as video files. But still, you would know any host would complain that you get too many downloads. But, the hosting companies for podcasts, like we were talking about, Libsyn and Blueberry and Spreaker and all those, they don't care. They're geared for that. They have huge servers, and I have never ever had a problem with their hosting or their pricing or anything. It's everybody can afford it.
Can I ask you something else? I mean, you used to work for Danish Radio. I know that. So we have a discussion going on in Sweden about podcasts made out of radio programs. And are they podcasts or not? And what is the difference between being an indie podcaster? And I mean, that discussion is going on constantly. What is your view on that?
I cannot believe we have this discussion anymore. No, I see that this discussion fades away in a way, but in the communities that you and I are in, we still discuss that. We still differ between an indie podcast, a niche podcast, an individual podcaster, and radio podcasts, because there is a huge difference. It's different people. It's different kind of content, and it's a completely different mindset. But radio has moved more and more into the same way of creating content as we podcasters. I know they have learned a lot from podcasters. I, as a radio person, have learned fantastic much, from podcasters, and especially niche podcasters, personal podcasters, I call it, because you are more personal. Because you're not getting paid for it. It's not your job. You're not just a host on a podcast where you, where you're in a group of journalists, for instance, or radio people who, you're on your own. It's your personal idea. It's your personal stuff. It's your personal drive, So there is a difference. Are you hired to do this, or is this something that you do completely out of your own interest? And there is going to be this difference for many, many years. I know there is, because they have a hard time. Radio people have a hard time leaving this mindset of it's me personally. It's me as a human being. It's my interests. It's my responsibility. It's my own. It's not just something I do for the listeners or for my boss. It's something that I do. Why do you do the shipping podcast, Lena? When you answer all this, it's not because the shipping industry has asked you to do it.
Definitely not.
No. And my own podcast, Solopreneurcast, it's not nobody asked me to do this. It's just something I felt that if I have a niche, that's the one, because I'm a solo entrepreneur. I'm alone in my business, and it's great. And it's just the way I think about things. So let me make a podcast about that. It's just a different mindset. But you will hear a lot of radio stations. They have changed a lot over the years, and you can hardly hear the difference. Yes, you can. You and I can. And a lot of people who are listening to your podcast know exactly what's the difference.
So, but does the radio people or the podcast from the radio, is that also an RSS feed? Do they work the same way?
If I should be really fundamentalistic, if they cannot point out and own the RSS feed, they're not podcasters.
Okay.
Then they're producing content for a podcast. Mm-hmm. They're contributing to a podcast. that somebody else owns. But if you're not able to get access to the RSS feed and do something there and take it somewhere else and move it around and do, like I said, own it, it's not really your podcast, is it?
No.
Just like an app, you can, or a blog. I mean, if you write a blog, you put up a blog, you do everything yourself, it's your blog. Nobody else can go in and say, hey, I want to write something on your blog. No way. And they cannot take your content and do with it what they want to do. They can't copy it. They can't change it and put it up somewhere else. No way. It's your content. And it's the same with your podcast. So that's the importance of owning your own content. And I didn't own the articles I wrote for the newspaper I was on. I didn't own the radio programs that I was hosting or anything. I didn't own that. But when podcasts came up, that's when I really felt you can own your own media. You can do with this media what you want to do. You can make money from it. You can give money away on it. You can talk to people. You can do whatever you want. Nobody else can come and decide for you what you should do with your podcast. It's yours. And if you think that's important, that's when you want to keep RSS, because we don't have anything better. Believe me, we have something more sophisticated. We have Facebook and all these new social media and, are working. That's more sophisticated. That's probably more modern, more technological. But in the basic fundamental idea of RSS is what you want. You want to own your own content.
So, I mean, if I speak to you about, for instance, I think Anchor, and there are some other new kids on the block that is hosting and saying, sign up here.
Many.
And we help you to start your podcast and so on. That means that I sign away my RSS feed to them if I sign up.
Yeah, you do. That's what you give them. That's you should look at their business model. And since Anchor came out, we were thinking, why? How can a completely new company from New York, how can they suddenly give this away for free and become the biggest podcast creating app in the world? And what is their business model? What do they really want to do? They want to have a lot of users so they can sell the app to someone else. That's my opinion. That's the only thing they want to do. And one day they're going to leave all these content providers behind somehow. And it might be very easy to host and to create a podcast on Anchor. And you could do a lot of things on Anchor. But one thing you cannot do, you cannot get access to your stats. It's them. It's Anchor who submits your podcast to Apple, for instance, so you cannot go in and get stats from Apple. Why do they do that? Yeah, they do it to make it easier. No, but I want to do that. It's not too hard to find out to submit your own RSS feed to Podcast Connect and be a part of Apple Podcasts. It's not too hard. So why should somebody else do that for you? So that's what they do. They make it easy to get more users, and people are kind of happy with it because they are, it's a relief for them. Oh, I don't have to worry about this and that. But one day they're going to leave people behind. Just like over the years, I've seen so many big podcast hosts services go down just from one day to the other. They pull the plug, no more money. Investors pull their money back and everything. So, no, don't do it.
Thank you. Thank you for your good advice. I hope you are not called a fundamentalist anymore, but I wanted more people to hear this from you because you keep teaching me all the time, and I'm very grateful for that. And I can put all my so-called silly questions to you, and you explain it to me. Why I should learn and why I should understand and how it all works. So, thank you very much.
You have if I can say something, you have an age. I'm 59, you know, you have what, but you also have your podcasting age. And a lot of people are in this who are very young. They came into podcasting just a few years ago, maybe. So they don't have the same history as I do, for instance. And when I'm 95, I will still be talking about RSS-feed and how important it is, unless something better comes up, but I don't think so. Thank you very much, Lena.
Thank you for taking the time and speak to me, and hope to see you soon.
Tack för att du lyssnar på Podgeek. Glöm inte att söka upp oss via sociala medier. Där kan du diskutera med oss och andra som lyssnar.
Vi finns på Instagram, Twitter och Facebook.
Alla adresserna hittar du på podgeek.se.